In a packed courtroom, the nation was gripped as Taylor Swift, one of the world's most beloved pop stars, faced the verdict of an unprecedented case. The media buzz had been relentless. The incident, nicknamed the Diddy bomb scandal, had drawn in some of the biggest names in entertainment. For months, speculation spread about Taylor's alleged involvement in a scandal that, until recently, seemed unfathomable. Taylor stood at the defense table, her usually confident demeanor replaced by tension. The judge, a steely presence, adjusted his glasses and looked her way. He cleared his throat, the echo of his voice hanging ominously over the hushed courtroom. "We have weighed the evidence, reviewed all testimonies," the judge began, his gaze fixed upon Taylor, "and in the matter of Swift versus the state, we find the defendant guilty as charged." The words sent a shockwave through the room. Gasps rippled from the public gallery. Reporters scrambled to capture every detail, some whispering into their microphones, others simply stunned. Taylor's face, once radiant with a performer's unbreakable spirit, drained of all color. Her lawyer tried to steady her, but the gravity of the sentence seemed too much. The judge's words cut through the silence. "Taylor Swift, you are hereby sentenced to serve a term of 3 years in state prison." As if struck by an invisible force, Taylor staggered, her knees buckling. She crumpled to the ground, a collective gasp erupting from the gallery. Her lawyer, the security detail, even her family in the front row rushed to her side, their faces mirroring the disbelief of 1,000 onlookers. Paramedics were immediately called, and Taylor was escorted out, pale and unresponsive. Meanwhile, the courtroom erupted, conversations merging into a frenzy as people tried to process the shocking outcome. Outside, the world braced for what was sure to be the media story of the decade. Though Taylor would recover physically, the psychological weight of the scandal and her sentence was bound to be heavy. The headlines buzzed with intrigue, disbelief, and questions about what would happen next. And as the news spread, fans and critics alike found themselves caught up in a mystery too surreal to ignore. Title: The Trial of a Lifetime. The courtroom was silent as Taylor Swift stood at the defendant's table, her lawyer beside her, sweat beading on her forehead. The air was thick with tension. Outside the windows, a flurry of paparazzi gathered, waiting for the sensational verdict that had been whispered about for weeks. No one could believe it would come to this. But the accusations were real, the indictment had been served, and now, it was time for the decision. The courtroom was filled with the buzz of reporters, eager to get a glimpse of the star who once captivated millions with her songs of heartbreak and empowerment. Today, however, it wasn't her music that had brought her to the public eye. It was a criminal trial unlike any other. Taylor had been accused of involvement in a bomb plot orchestrated by none other than Sean "Diddy" Combs. The charges were as strange as they were terrifying. Authorities had uncovered a conspiracy in which Taylor, seemingly unknowingly, had become an accomplice in a high-profile bombing scheme that aimed to cripple the entertainment industry. The bomb, planted at a high-profile gala, had caused panic and chaos, though thankfully no one was seriously harmed. But the media storm had been unrelenting. Fans and detractors alike dissected every move she made, speculated on her relationships, and scrutinized every text message that could tie her to Diddy. The case was already a spectacle, and the courtroom drama was reaching its boiling point. Taylor's lawyer, a seasoned defense attorney, had pleaded her innocence. He argued that Taylor had been unknowingly manipulated by Diddy, a figure she had once considered a mentor, but who had twisted her trust for his own dark purposes. Despite this defense, the prosecution had painted a different picture, one of greed, fame, and a woman willing to do anything to stay relevant in an industry where power often meant everything. The judge, a stern figure, had read out the charges in a low, measured voice. Each word felt like a hammer, striking Taylor's heart. The evidence, circumstantial but damning, seemed to stack up against her. Finally, after a long pause, the verdict was delivered. Guilty, the judge pronounced. Taylor's blood ran cold. She had been fighting this nightmare for months, hoping for a different outcome. But now, reality hit her like a freight train. The courtroom erupted into whispers and gasps. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, her vision blurring as the walls of the courtroom seemed to close in around her. The judge continued, "Taylor Swift, you are hereby sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for your role in the bombing conspiracy, effective immediately." The words felt like a cruel joke. A nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Taylor stood there, frozen in disbelief. Her mind raced, the sound of her heart pounding in her ears. She had worked so hard to build a career, a legacy, a life that people admired, and now, it was all crumbling before her. And then, the world went dark. She collapsed. Her body went limp, and the room erupted into chaos. Her lawyer rushed to her side, trying to catch her before she hit the floor. But it was too late. Taylor Swift had fainted, the shock and disbelief of the sentence too much for her to bear. As she was escorted out of the courtroom on a stretcher, the headlines began to write themselves: "Taylor Swift collapses after prison sentence in Diddy bomb case." Outside, the media frenzy reached a fever pitch. The world was left reeling, uncertain of what this meant for the pop icon's future, and how much of the story was true. In the days that followed, the story only deepened. The court would review the sentence, and questions surrounding her involvement with Diddy grew even murkier. Was she truly guilty, or had she been a pawn in someone else's game? Taylor's life, once a fairy tale of success and stardom, had turned into a twisted saga of scandal and legal battles. What was certain was that her fight for redemption had only just begun. The world waited, and the story of Taylor Swift, and her connection to Diddy, was far from over. Title: The Swift Reckoning. The courtroom was tense, its air heavy with anticipation. A hush fell over the crowd as the judge banged his gavel, calling for order. In the defendant's seat sat Taylor Swift, her once radiant smile replaced with an expression of grim determination. The past few months had been a blur of headlines, media scrutiny, and constant court appearances, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Taylor had been indicted in connection with a bombshell scandal involving Sean "Diddy" Combs. The media had dubbed it the Diddy bomb, a controversial situation that was a mix of questionable business dealings, secretive meetings, and accusations that seemed too wild to be true. Yet, evidence had surfaced, leading to a chaotic investigation into the rapper-turned-business mogul, with Swift somehow tangled in the fallout. It had all begun when a mysterious source leaked confidential documents that implicated not only Diddy in illicit activities but also several high-profile names in the music industry. Taylor had never been connected to anything like this, but the fallout was undeniable. Rumors swirled that she'd been unknowingly drawn into a web of deceit, and for weeks, the tabloids had painted her as the victim. However, the courtroom had other plans. Her legal team had fought hard, arguing that Taylor had been the unwitting pawn in a much larger scheme. But, as the trial went on, the prosecution presented a damning piece of evidence, a series of cryptic texts from Taylor to Diddy, suggesting a deeper involvement than anyone had expected. The texts, though seemingly innocent at first glance, had been parsed and analyzed with such precision that even Taylor couldn't deny the implications. As the judge read the final ruling, a silence fell over the room. "Taylor Allison Swift," the judge's voice echoed, "you are hereby sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for your involvement in the conspiracy related to the Diddy bomb scandal." The words hit Taylor like a freight train. Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat, and for a brief moment, everything went silent in her mind. The realization of what this meant, her career, her reputation, the millions of fans who adored her, all of it was crumbling in front of her. The weight of it all was too much. Her legs buckled beneath her. With a soft gasp, Taylor collapsed to the ground, her body trembling as if the very earth had shifted beneath her. The room erupted into chaos as her legal team rushed to her side, the courtroom's tension boiling over. She heard shouts, distant voices trying to call for help, but everything seemed so far away. Her world had become a blur of flashing lights, gasps, and murmurs. As paramedics rushed in, the last thing Taylor heard before slipping into unconsciousness was the faint, echoing voice of her lawyer. "We will fight this, Taylor. We're not done." But as the world outside the courtroom buzzed with sensational headlines, Taylor's mind remained focused on one thing: she hadn't just lost the battle, she had lost something far more precious than fame. She had lost her sense of control. And now, she had to fight to get it back.